We have an international lineup of world-class speakers this morning, and it's my pleasure to introduce the first speaker, Dr. Andrew Cromie. Andrew, he's the Technical Director of the Irish Cattle Breeding Federation, which was established in 1998, a non-profit organisation that provides cattle breeding information services to both the Irish dairy and beef industries. Coming from a dairy and beef background, Andrew has specific responsibility for the delivery of services to the Irish cattle breeding industry, including genetics, genomics, breeding programs for the Irish Cattle Breeding Federation Herd Plus service. His particular work area at present is the Irish Beef Genomics Scheme, which is the largest livestock genomics project globally, with some 2.5 million animals being genotyped as part of an EU-funded project, with the Irish Department of Agriculture, Food and Marine. The Irish Cattle Breeding Federation established Sheep Ireland in 2009, which provides sheep information services on the same basis as their approach to dairy and beef farmers. Core to this approach is that both organisations are focused on the profitability of farmers. Get that right, and all the other stakeholders in the wider industry will benefit. Like New Zealand, Sheep Ireland have a central progeny test, and to quote from their website, the CPT was set up not as a breed comparison, but rather as a ram and trait comparison. It is focused on identifying our best sheep genetics regardless of their breed. Hear, hear. Andrew will give us an experience on data quality indexes, breeding programs and genetic evaluations. Andrew.
First of all, Chairman, I'd like to say thank you for the introduction, and thank you to Graham and the Beef and Lamb New Zealand team for inviting me here today. When Graham sent me this email about 3 months ago to see would I be interested in coming down to speak at the conference, I checked the dates, and let's just say he got an immediate response. I'm not sure if you'd designed it in this way, but I was certainly very, very happy to fly in here on Saturday morning and obviously go to the test match there on Saturday night. It was a fantastic occasion. It's a pity about the result, but we have another 2 matches to come. So look, my talk is the Irish experience, data quality index, breeding programs and genetic evaluations. In terms of the Irish experience, well, it was almost positive. So this is Sean O'Brien, the Irish flanker, barging over for that momentous try. Pity we didn't get another couple of them, but I think you would all agree it was a fantastic try. The Irish experience, always enjoyable. What year is this, do you reckon? Any guesses? Very, very close. It was 77, the first test in Wellington. A greasy, wet pitch, you can see. Why I put it up there particularly is this guy here, the legendary Moss Keane. So Moss would have played for Ireland 50 or 60 times. He was on the famous Munster team that beat the All Blacks. And Moss was a real character. He's about 6'4" in build and size and big physique, but he was in the nightclub in Wellington afterwards, after the game, and he was approached by a local girl, you know. And she said to him, she was looking and she was admiring his physique. She said, gosh, she said, if you don't mind me asking, and what size are you? And he says, I'm 6'5". And she looked down suggestively at him, and she said, and then she said, and would you mind me asking, are you built in proportion? To which Moss said, he says, well, if I was, I'd be about 8 foot tall. So the Irish experience is one which is always enjoyable. We do sometimes get there, and I could talk for a few minutes on this one, but this is obviously the famous Irish victory in Chicago, 40 points to 29. The man in the middle here is Rory Best. I'm from a place called Banbridge in County Town, and Rory's from Banbridge, the farm beside us at home. In fact, his father might even be in here this evening. They're on their way, obviously, to Wellington to the game. So we do sometimes get there, but to bring it back into the context of breeding and what I'm here to talk about it, getting there is not without its challenges, and this is our weekly publication in Ireland, the Irish Farmers Journal, which hits about 90,000 farmers, you know, in terms of weekly publication. And this was a headline in that paper there a number of months ago: useless pedigree breeders costing farmers millions. And what was the gist of the article? It was, you know, the real challenge around data recording and data quality of data recording, and in many ways commercial beef farmers in Ireland saying, no, stop, this has to stop. We need high quality data and we need accurate genetic evaluations, and unless we're going to get it, it's going to cost our industry millions. So that's what I'm really here to talk about here today to this group, obviously a group of sheep breeders. Actually, as a matter of interest, how many also have beef cattle at home? Oh, good. And stud breeders, beef stud breeders, a few beef stud breeders as well. Great. Okay, so the overview of my talk, I'm going to talk a wee bit about Irish cattle breeding. I'm going to cover genetic evaluations, and that's our uro-Star indexes and our genomic evaluations. I'm going to talk about breeding programs and how that generates genetic gain through our Gene Ireland is the name of our trademark name of our breeding program. I'll speak a bit about the Irish Beef Genomics program, the Herd Plus service, and finish really around the whole area of data quality, and then a final summary. So in terms of Irish Cattle Breeding Federation, or Irish Cattle Breeding, is coordinated by ICBF. It's a cooperative of 30 cattle breeding organisations established initially established in 1998, formally established in 2000. It has an operating budget of about $10 million New Zealand dollars, with a staff of about 70 people that are then servicing 100,000 cattle farmers in Ireland. The database, and I'm going to have a slide on that, is now really the cornerstone of the industry, and I can't overstate, how important, you know, the central database has become to our ag-food industry in Ireland as a means to consolidate and have information and be able to respond to challenges and opportunities. To have all of the data in one central database is an absolute, you know, it's a fantastic development, and one which took a lot of work to put in place, but now our dairy and beef industries are benefiting from it. Right from the very outset, and it was a New Zealander, Brian Wickham. Some of you may have come across Brian. Brian was the first CEO of ICBF, and very quickly set a tone of moving away from, you know, the more typical, you know, the show ring type approach to one of focused on profit from science, and ICBF has lived by that statement since its inception, since the very, very start. So quite unapologetic about profit from science. And that's, and it alone presents its challenges, but we'll come back to that. One point I would make is the benefit or the importance of independent genetic evaluations, and the fact that we have so much commercial animal information in the genetic evaluations generates a huge level of trust. We're a farmer-owned and controlled organisation, so it generates a huge level of trust from farmers in the independence of ICBF. So we have no vested interest. We don't own bulls. You know, we're able to come and provide independent genetic evaluations and advice then for farmers. And perhaps one thing that we do well, and really I would suggest maybe one of the key reasons why Graham asked us to come over here is to talk about, you know, where we would see ourselves excelling in, and this is in the area of implementation. I'm very pleased to be here this morning, and you know, we have geneticists here this morning, and I don't mind for embarrassing them by saying it, but Ben and people like Ben and Dorian, who we would consider are the, you know, these are the people that are bringing forward the new research. In Ireland, our approach is, whilst we have good researchers, it's picking that research up and then having an infrastructure that allows rapid dissemination of that. And that presents opportunities to have projects like the Beef Genomics Project, which Matt, our chairman, acknowledged at the start as the largest livestock genomics project in the world currently. That gives you a very quick sense of the ICBF are based down here, down in Cork, but that gives you a sense of, you know, the shareholding of ICBF as a structure, AI, milk recording, herd books, the farm organisations, representation of our board. Took a lot of work to put this together formally in 1998 and 2000, but effectively now cattle breeding decisions in Ireland are made by the stakeholders, and those stakeholders then are largely either the service providing stakeholders here, they're farmers representing these organisations, and then we have our farm organisations. So effectively we're a farmer owned and controlled industry in that regard. Just very quickly about Sheep Ireland, as Matt indicated, established in 2000. Now, they're a separate legal entity to ICBF, but do have a direct link. So they're based at our offices in Bandon. They use our infrastructure, some of our genetic evaluation staff. There's a board of 9, 3 farm orgs, and then with the meat processors, flock books, producer groups, Lamb Plus, Central Progeny Test Programme, and the Department of Agriculture. So representatives from each of those entities. A staff of 6 plus contracted field staff, and a budget of about just over $1 million. A majority of it is still coming from a direct contribution from our government and 30% from industry. And that organisation services about 700 breeders, which generate about 10,000 rams, which are about 50% of the industry requirement in terms of rams. So, I mean, I'm going to talk now, so that just gives you a sense about Sheep Ireland and its relationship with ICBF, but for the rest of my talk, I'm really going to talk about beef, but a lot of what I'm going to cover in terms of breeding programs, genetic evaluations, dissemination, all of that is obviously equally relevant in the context of sheep. So this is the central database, which, you know, I've talked about is the core to what we do in Ireland. There's a similar merit to this for dairy, but this is just to cover the beef aspect of the database. So every calf is registered, you know, about 2.3 million calves, 1.4 million from dairy cows, and 900,000 for beef. So these are a separate database for our EU traceability system, and then this is a live database with a live feed. So each of these calves that are being born, you know, on a daily basis is populating into the database. And then we're adding in all of this additional data, whether it's sire ancestry, calving, live weights, calf. So this is the data coming from 60,000 commercial beef and 18,000 dairy farms that have beef on dairy. And then you have our herd books, about 30,000 pedigree calves. So this is the top of the pyramid, the seed stock side of it. You know, we have about 4,000 pedigree breeders, we'll call them stud breeders, generating about 30,000 calves per year. And there we're getting the additional data, live animal data. The genotyping companies that are linked in, generating about 350,000 genotypes per year. So at this stage in the database, we have over 1 million genotypes, and we're genotyping, well, over the next 2 to 3 years, that'll finish out that project, which again, Matt talked about, 2.5 million genotypes. This is the big beef genomics scheme. I'll come back to it. Our AI companies are, you know, as cows are inseminated, beef cows are inseminated, all of that data comes into the database. All the meat processor data is linked into the database, so 40 abattoirs, 1.6 million carcasses per year. So if an animal is traded through an auction, a lot of animals are traded. Sucklers are, you know, we have a wingling system. The wingling calf is winged off and will get traded through the marts, more typically in the west of Ireland. The sucklers are more typically in the west, and then they're traded through marts, and they move into the eastern part of the country for finishing. But importantly, we get the movement, we will get the weight and the price per kilo of that wingling. All of that comes back in on a daily basis, so it's generating a lot of data, about 1.8 million records per year. And then we have our progeny test program, which are then the progeny of the AI bulls that are going through our central performance test system for commercial cattle, about 400 to 500 cattle per year. So there's a huge amount of data being generated on beef animals every day in Ireland. And it's done through removal of duplicity, you know, through sharing of data, and it's done in the principle of, you know, people sharing data on the basis of a better overall outcome for farmers in the industry. And that's the basis of how ICBF and the database works. Because if you think about it, you know, to have meat processors here, the farmers, in many ways, the farmer's enemy, you know, and a lot of the time, but voluntarily sharing back that price and carcass weight data into the database, it's hugely valuable from a whole genetic improvement perspective, and that's why they're prepared to do it. So that gives you a sense of the database. And the breeding goal in beef, if we think about it, we're going to talk a wee bit about breeding objectives. What's the breeding goal in beef? I mean, the ideal suckler cow in Ireland, no different to the ideal suckler cow in New Zealand. She must be able to calve herself, calve each year, must have enough milk to rear her calf, be not too big, have a good quality calf of foot. We want a balanced cow. Irish beef farmers want a good all-round cow. She needs to produce more output from less input. So what does that mean? It means more profitable, more sustainable, more efficient. So I talked about the balanced cow. You can see this cow's nicely balanced in the gate. She was obviously looking away that morning, but didn't manage to get away. So, but this is the sort of cow, I mean, and again, this is part of our sort of a, you know, in the Farmer's Journal, we'd be constantly promoting and talking about 5 stars. I'll talk about, you know, but this is a high, we would consider a high genetic merit commercial cow, you know, on a farmer, one of our commercial beef farmers, you know. So this is a 9-year-old Simmental cross cow. She's in the top 1%. So we provide genetic evaluations for commercial cattle, commercial cows, not just the stud cows. And you can see she calved at 2-year-old, and she's at 8 calves with an average calving interval of 365 days. So, I mean, how do we get more of these cows? I mean, that's what we're really about. And if we look at our uro-Star replacement index, I mean, these are the traits that are in that overall index. I mean, we're looking less calving problems, cows that are going to eat less, have more carcass weight for age, more milk, better fertility, and be more docile. And you can see the emphasis there, if you talk about it in the context of overall profitability. About 71% of the emphasis on our index is based on those cow traits, and about 29% then based on her calf. But it has to be part of that overall package. And this is what typically a beef farmer in Ireland will see. I mean, we have these 2 indexes, the replacement index and the terminal index, and we have a euro value here, and then we have the star rating. So the profit index value, this is you know, you can see that this bull, or it could be a cow, has an index value of 80 euros. It indicates that relative to a bull or a cow at 0, you know, that bull will have daughters with 80 euros more profit per calving. The evaluations are multi-breed, so we don't get caught up on Angus or Hereford or Simmental or whatever. Everything is all together in the one genetic evaluations, pedigrees, commercials, so that farmers can directly compare. You know, if he wants to use an Angus or a Hereford or a Limousin, he can directly compare them. And we have this system, a very simple system based on the star rating, the top 20% being 5 stars, the bottom 20% being 1 star, a bit like the hotel analogy. And it operates both on a cross-breed basis, but also within the breeds. Okay, so, you know, you can see that an example here is this animal within this is 4-star across all of the breeds, at an index value of 80 euros, but when represented within that particular Limousin breed, it's actually 3 stars, okay? But this is the one here that the commercial farmers focus in on. It's the crossbreed stars. And we do have a very high level of farmer understanding with regard to the indexes. And why is that? One of the key drivers of that has been, you know, programs, big, like the beef data and genomics scheme, where as part of that, 2.5 years ago, we had to have a very, very intense extension education with the 25,000 farmers that are involved in that scheme. And they understand the indexes, and they understand what they want, and they understand what they don't want. And that's very, very positive. So I talked a wee bit about the index, and this is the challenge, whether it's beef or sheep. I mean, what are we trying to do as geneticists whenever, you know, we talk about collecting data and genetic evaluations and putting it in an index? And this is just a simple plot. I know it looks like just a lot of dots, but this is just a simple plot of AI sires for their genetic merit here for weaning weight for milk, and here's their genetic merit for carcass weight of their progeny. And you can see the challenge that you face is that there's a negative genetic correlation here of about 0.46. So we're constantly trying to identify, if you think about that cow, we want a good cow with good cow traits, but we also want her to have a good calf. But those 2 sets of traits are operating against each other. There's a negative correlation. And we all know that because you've known in the past that when you selected on the carcass, the terminal traits, well, you reduced the female traits. And that's the challenge. So what we're trying to do with indexes is obviously we call them these curve benders. We want these bulls in here that have milk in their daughters, so are good for milk, you know, getting 10 or 15 kilos of milk in their daughters, but also are having progeny with good carcass weights as well, 20, 30 kilos. So these are the bulls that we're really trying to identify through genomics and breeding programs to get used widely within the population. Use these bulls, we can drive genetic gain. In the past, we were using these bulls, the bulls with the big pluses on carcass weights, but of course we were losing milk then in the cows and setting our industry back. So we're constantly trying to identify these curve benders. Why are we trying to identify them? Well, And this is a very neat piece of analysis that we did there about 6 or 7 months ago, looking at the performance of 5-star cows. So think of that Simmental cow that we had earlier on. She was in the top 1%. So these are the top 20% 5-star cows with a replacement index of 108 euros. And if we actually look at the attributes, the phenotypes, the data on the ground in these 5-star cows, so we took their genetic evaluations whenever they were. So these were heifers that were born in 2012. They were calving in for the first time in 2014. So we have 3 years of data here. And what do we see? We see that on average, the index is rewarding cows that are, compared to the 1-star, 60, 70 kilos lighter. So if you're feeding cows, which you are, grass, supplement, we want cows that are lighter, that are eating less feed. But critically, look, they're producing a heavier weanling, 25 kilo heavier calf. So a lighter cow producing a heavier calf. It's exactly what we want, with a shorter calving interval. And interestingly then, when you get to slaughter, this is about the curve benders, we want to identify these cows that are not going to lose it on carcass weight. So we're breaking this correlation to identify then these cows that are going to generate progeny that are going to get into 300, and, in this case, 358 kilos of carcass. It's no different from the progeny carcass weight of the 1-star cows, the more typically terminal cows. And of course, crucially, in the current environment, where we're all well aware of the climate, the CO2, the challenges with regard to greenhouse gases. In total CO2 equivalent output, they're actually producing less CO2. So we're winning, we're ticking the box right across the board in terms of profitability, sustainability, carbon efficiency. Cows that will produce more from less. It's worth 100 euros a cow to you as a commercial beef farmer. So if you have 100 cows, there's 10,000 euros, in your pocket. That's the difference in profitability. So the question we're currently asking ourselves, well, then, how do we generate more of these 4- and 5-star cows? And that's the challenge for an organisation such as ICBF. I want to just give you a sense of the structure that we have put in place. So we have about 1 million commercial suckler cows here, and then I'm going to keep coming back to these are the seed stock producers up here generating they have the high replacement index pedigree cows and using AI bulls to generate these young bulls. And obviously, what we're doing in the context of the program in Ireland then is using genomics. We're identifying the best of these young bulls and then putting them through a progeny test program. So a progeny test program, quite similar to your own, but where we're looking to then gather really accurate progeny test data on lots of traits, milk fertility, carcass feed intake, etc. And I mean, the semen from these young bulls, about 500 straws per bull, is put out into commercial suckler herds where we gather all this data, and also in our commercial progeny test unit where we put 400 or 500 of these progeny through per year for feed intake. And all of that data then is coming back in to generate genetic evaluations. And this is the bit that's the crucial bit, and we can talk a wee bit more about this one. It's about how do we get these guys, the bull breeders, then to use these sorts of bulls, the best of these sorts of bulls, to breed the next generation. Because it's only through that they're then generating the young calves. About 80% of the calves on the commercial suckler beef herd are born from stock bulls, 20% AI. So we need these guys using these young bulls, these best bulls, as opposed to the showy or the Rossetti or the catalogue bull, to really drive genetic gain down here in the commercial suckler beef herd. And like that, we're also then allows us to identify the very best. These are the stock bulls, and then some of them are using obviously AI directly down in here, about 20%. All of this is facilitated greatly by genomics, and we're going to talk a lot about genomics this morning. But it's in terms of allowing earlier and more accurate identification of profitable animals for the breeding program. The whole structure we call Gene Ireland. And you can see there's lots of individual components to it, but it is actually about working in each and working hard in each of those areas to help drive genetic gain. And I would say, like within ICBF, we've a lot of the bits of the infrastructure in place, but one cannot underestimate the importance of this piece here in terms of engagement with the stud sector to really generate gain. That's the kerosene on the fire, You can have lots of the other stuff, but that's the stuff that really gets it going. So the Gene Ireland programme was launched in 2014. It took us a while to learn. We're on version 3. But there's a point in that as well, is that, change takes time. So we put the initial progeny test structure in place in 2007. So that was just even getting the semen going out into commercial herds and collecting lots of data and using that data to get accurate genetic evaluations. That was all right. We had accurate genetic evaluations, but we didn't really have a good way of demonstrating that, and that was where we changed in 2012, where we moved our whole focus from our central performance test program, which had brought pedigree bulls in there, to having commercial progeny. So a really strong data now on feed intake and efficiency, and using it as a vehicle to demonstrate the benefits of genetics. And then in 2014, we shifted the focus completely away from sort of more ambivalence towards, a combination of maternal and terminal to be driving much harder on the maternal traits. And that took a lot of consultations because you're changing an industry. And look, we would have done a lot of work with Peter and the team in Abacus Bio, helping us to get that independent justification for change and consultation with the industry. And, that certainly has helped a lot. And now we have a program that's very much focused then on more bulls, more quickly for all traits to try and drive that genetic gain. And we've about 100 bulls tested through that at this point in time. And the first graduates are coming through the program now, which, is very, very exciting. Those are the bulls whose 2-year-old daughters are calving and the calves are on the ground. And certainly we're starting to build a really strong bit of momentum around that beef breeding program. And success, it's been quite successful. We would consider, if you even look at the top 20 AI bulls that are available for a replacement index are now graduates of that program already with genomics. They're getting over the 50% reliability, and the first of them have daughters on the ground. And breeders are starting to use these bulls. And obviously that's, for us, is the way we're going to really generate the gain. The genetic trends are moving in the right direction. But look, it will take time. We've saw it in dairy. It took us 10 years to get momentum really going in the dairy program, and we're only 3 or 4 years into the beef program. But if we look at the sort of the genetic trends, you can see, and this is classic, focused on combination of maternal, terminal, not making any progress, and overall not profit. So we shifted the focus obviously towards these maternal traits. So this is based on birth year of the bull. And you can see the Gene Ireland program was established in 2014. So the first of those bulls would have been really coming in, 211, 212 born bulls. And look, the difference here straight away is €80. It's €80 per cow per year. Across 1 million cows, that's 80 million euros to the industry. So that's the initial change in approach and direction around focusing on this combination of the replacement and the terminal traits through the overall index there. So that's the average genetic merit of the young bulls, and you can see that they're starting to drag up now the average genetic merit. These are the first, the 2-year-old heifers calving in. So you can see no gain, but now we're starting to see the impact of the breeding program starting to drag this up. And it's currently running about €5 per year, and we know based on our modelling that there's an opportunity to generate that, to pull that up to about €15 per cow per year. And importantly, you can see we're starting to slowly get that response with the bull breeders. The genetic trends are starting to move in the right direction. But unless we have, these are our main breeds, Angus, Charley, Hereford, Limousin and Simmental. Unless you have these main breeds, working along, in tandem with the breeding goal, then you will not be able to make genetic gain. It's as simple as that. So it really is about, engagement. And how do we accelerate gain? 2 of the initiatives that we have, obviously, is the Beef Data and Genomics program that Matt would have alluded to. And look, it's a program, people look at it so enviously, 300 million euros of total funding over 6 years, 2015 to 2020. So farmers in that scheme get paid €90 per cow per year to complete key actions according to the scheme, one of which is that they have to have a minimum number of these 4 or 5-star females on their farm. They must only be using 4 or 5-star bulls in terms of AI or stock bulls. There's 24,000 farms and 600,000 cows involved in the scheme, so it's generating a huge amount of data. Now, I know people will say, you know, that's fanciful, that's in Europe. We could never do something like that here. Well, I would challenge that view, because I can promise you it's disbelieving what your government are going to spend trying to address climate in the context over the next 5, 10, 15 years. And unless you as farmers and as an industry are knocking that door, ag food is seen as largely irrelevant in the conversation. It's a problem, but we just have to live with it. If excuse the language, if the bloody cows went away, it'd be less of a problem. But the simple point is we need cows, we need sheep, we need livestock. And we want to make sure that when we have them, we have the right sorts of ones. And that's just the whole objective around the replacement index, the principle of more from less. Very, very consistent with the whole climate change. And that's how we presented that discussion to the Commission, and that's how we got funded for this big project. I'd also suggest, you know, and this is a key point here, people say paying farmers €90, it's a direct subsistence. It's not fair. Again, I'd argue very, very strongly against that. If we were to put, if Beef and Live, Lamb New Zealand were put people on the road to collect data, I can guarantee you it's a lot more than €90 per cow you'd be paying for through your levy funding or whatever. Our argument is farmers are there. Farmers can record the data. It's a cost incurred to them to bring the cattle in, you know, to collect the data, to load the data up. But it's a justifiable cost associated with running the scheme. So that's how we were able to present that to our government and to the EU. And as a consequence, look, we have 1 million animals genotyped to date, and 2.5 million will be genotyped in total. And it's why we can provide a genomic service to the industry at €22 per animal, which again is the lowest cost genomic service available anywhere in the world. In terms of technical, and I know you're going to get lots more of this over the course of the next couple of hours, it's based on blending the conventional EBV with the direct genomic value. So that's the current approach we use, but obviously we're moving to single-step GBLUP. Our goal in that is 2018, and with people like Dorian Ismo Strandon from Finland, these are the sorts of people, Dorian's involved in our SAC, Scientific Advisory Committee, that are leading that development and thinking around how we move to single-step genomic evaluations. And this is just a key point in terms of the farmer-recorded data. These are the data. Look at all the data the farmers are recording. You know, okay, the SAR, the calf calving age, birth size, vigour, calf quality, docility, scar, pneumonia, docility of the cow, milkability, reason why she was culled on a stock bull. So lots of really high quality data, 600,000 records on cows and calves. And the other thing that we find, you know, again, against the purists, you know, farmers actually, they know their animals, they can record the data accurately. If they didn't, you wouldn't get heritability estimates. Heritability is based on the principle of accurate data recording, and then you can link it back to the sires and make sense of all this data. And we get a heritability of 30% for a trait like docility. You as farmers know the cows that are hard to handle and the calves that are hard to handle and those that are not, and you'll record it accurately. And whenever enough people do that, well, then you get excellent heritability estimates to identify the best for the next generation. And interestingly, when we look at the genetic correlation between that and the experts, the trained technicians recording docility, you know, the genetic correlation is 0.8. So a very, very high genetic correlation between, we'll call it the farmer recorded and the technician recorded data. I mean, another way of generating more gain is through this Herd Plus service, and this is just an example of the benchmark reports that we can generate from the database now. So think about all the slaughter data that's coming in on a daily basis. So you've killed 40 or 80 cattle to your local meat processor, all that data comes in, and then this is an annual report where we express beef output per livestock unit. So all of this data, your cow, your calf data, is all in the database, and we tag in then obviously all of the individual carcass weight data to give you an indication of your beef output per unit or per hectare relative to your stocking unit. So these are all good examples of just, you know, the benefits of the database in terms of actually with farmers then being able to really see, you know, how breeding is starting to impact upon the profitability of their farm. It's just a really, really strong way of getting that message across. So our biggest challenge, what's our biggest challenge? Go on. Farm, yeah, apart from time, because I can see our chairman maybe looking up at me. But okay. Our biggest challenge, it comes back right back to the start, you know. It's moving the mindset of, you know, those breeders, you know. And why is that? Because, you know, whether we like it or not, 10, 15 pedigree cows, part-time job, job off the farm, focused on show and sales, visual, the big quality calf as opposed to the maternal traits. And this is the one that really hit us hard in the last sort of year. That ICBF then, the farmer-owned organisation, were accused very strongly of being tolerant of under-recording and mis-recording by pedigree bull breeders. Okay? And that put us in a very, very tight spot. Because what do we need bull breeders to do in the future? We need them to breed for profit, be consistent to our statement of intent. And I'd have to say that scheme has been the major catalyst, the Beef Data and Genomics Programme, because all of a sudden those 4,000 beef farmers knew and understood indexes, knew what they wanted and knew what they didn't want. And they also realised that from a lot of breeders, we're giving them what they didn't want and what they certainly didn't need. So much more focus on indexes, focused on maternal and terminal as opposed to just the terminal. And ICBF needing to promote those breeders that really want to do the right thing for the industry and reward those guys. And that programme is just launching. I mean, I know Graham has brought me here today to talk about the Irish experience. I mean, we haven't done it all. I'm giving you this as a step in time. I mean, we're just launching this major programme now because the ICBF tolerance to this is it's no longer acceptable. Useless pedigree breeders costing farmers millions. So these are just headlines taken out of the Farmers Journal over this last 9 months. Bid to increase accuracy of pedigree data. Is it time to license pedigree breeders? Some people were very fond of that idea. Should data be accepted from pedigree breeders at all? I mean, there was a view out there that the data was so rubbish from some of them, you should just bin it, Pedigree breeders are finding reform a struggle because all of a sudden ICBF are now starting to come in, changing the goalpost, causing a lot of angst. Progress to tackle false pedigree data remains sluggish. Finger pointed at us. We're not moving quickly enough. You need to take this, get it sorted. Is the pedigree breeder an easy target? Was he becoming the point of blame? And of course then we had this for a while. ICBF, beef breeders want to take their data back out of ICBF, We were seen as the big bad guys driving this change. And of course now with social media, Facebook, tweets, it was all viral. This was it's great if you're in the media business, but this was constant. So where are we now? Well, look, we've launched this whole herd performance recording. It is a data recording program for pedigree beef breeders. It's voluntary. And we have managed to get strong across industry support. So we put a stakeholder group together of farmers, commercial farmers, herd books, AI companies, ICBF. And I know that you have the data quality index here in the context of sheep in New Zealand, and we have it in Ireland in sheep as well. But our previous attempts on beef to get that off the ground hadn't worked. I can talk a wee bit why. And instead we've gone into to have a preference of, people, it's a voluntary scheme, you go into it, you get an audit done of your herd. And then when you meet that audit, you're in, and there's a minimum requirement to be considered a bull breeder. Okay, that's the way we're approaching it now. I do expect we'll evolve it to some sort of data quality index over time, but at this point in time, it's a minimum standard to be in, okay? And it is because, in fairness, there's a lot of really engaged bull breeders out there, and they want to show that the data recording carried out in their herds is done with the utmost accuracy and transparency. So what does it mean? It means all animals at that visit are weighed and scored, calves, weanlings, maiden heifers, in-calf heifers, cows, the bull, everything is inspected in terms of, and we weigh the key animals. One of the things, to be honest, that we saw a lot of, unreported caesareans, under-recording of calving issues. So even just walking through the paddock to look at every single cow, and in the database on your handheld what he has recorded. If you see a slit on the side of the cow and it's not on the database, you're out of the scheme. So it's these sorts of principles that we have to be true to now if we're going to really get this off the ground. We have a stock bull then. What's the reward? Well, the reward is your herd gets into this part of the database where there is an animal search down here that, effectively we have cleared, verified that the data in here, in these herds, has been audited by ICBF and is included. So it's a stock bull finder search. So if you're a commercial beef farmer or a pedigree beef farmer and you maybe are down in this part of the country and you want a Limousin bull down here in Wexford or Wicklow or different, down in these, Waterford down in here, you can select in these regions and you can say what you want in terms of your indexes, and that'll then return, the list of the highest indexed animals that are in the whole herd performance recording scheme. And I should say that has been successfully, at least the bull finder, that sheep finder there. Sorry, we have a sheep finder which was launched successfully in 2016. So this is a good example of us taking something from sheep and actually applying back into beef, but with the very additional add-on, which is that we also then do this whole herd performance audit to get into the database so that your animals can be shown on the bull finder. So the progress to date, we're really just launching. Interestingly, already 480 breeders have come across. Some interesting data are in terms of, if we look at just even the weights, a difference, and some significant differences in cow live weights. So we're now getting lots of cow live weights and pedigree cows, which we would never have got in the past. In the past, the only weighing that would have been done would have been for the terminal traits on the bulls to be sold. So now we're getting weights on cows. We have a target of about 2,000 herds. So we'll have 4,000 pedigree herds in Ireland. We'll get 2,000. That's our goal. And they'll cover 80% of the bulls then that are being generated.
Sorry, 80?
80. That's the target, yeah. And it's that bull finder, yes?
Just clarification, 80% bulls will be bred from here.
Yes.
50% of the rams can be sheep. Okay.
That's where the two equivalent programs are at this point in time, yep. But what's going to really drive this is the commercial beef farmers. Go back to the pedigree beef breeders costing us millions. I mean, the commercial beef farmers are driving this change now because they're only going to buy bulls from the guys that are in the program. If you're not in the program, I'm not buying your bull. So that's the key driver and the key difference. So look, Chairman, in summary, the Irish experience of beef breeding, I mean, we've very definitely moved from visual and terminal to focusing more on those terminal traits. The key initiatives driving that change, the database, the uro-Stars, Gene Ireland, the whole herd performance recording, and the genomic scheme. And I would say that last part, that really strong engagement now with the bull breeders is absolutely crucial. And that's what we see as the bit that's really going to help drive our genetic gain in the future. So it's exciting times for Irish beef breeding, always challenging, but certainly very exciting. And just to finish, I'd like to acknowledge a few people, obviously our government for their very strong support of ICBF on that big scheme, and a few New Zealanders, particularly Brian Wickham, who was a great mentor to me when he came in as CEO of ICBF, and really established some core principles in terms of how we operate as an organisation within the industry, focused on farmer profitability. Dorian, who's been a great supporter and contributor in terms of scientific contribution, and he's on our SAC. And we've had a long and very, very strong and fruitful relationship with Peter and the team at Abacus Bio in many projects and also in some of our genetic evaluations. And finally then to Graham and the Beef and Lamb New Zealand for their very kind invitation to speak today, and acknowledging our members as well. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Andrew. That was, I thought, pretty informative, and a couple of things I picked up on. Sheep or beef, doesn't matter. We want more from less. It's about efficiency and accelerating genetic gain. We've got time for one quick question for Andrew.
Oh, we have to use the mic.
Right.
I think we
Is there a question for Andrew?
a couple here.
Andrew, could you just expand on how you are measuring the efficiency of breeding cows?
So obviously cow live weight is a key driver. I mean, if we look at it in the context of the genetic correlation between cow live weight and feed intake is it's very high. It's about 0.8, and I mean that is effectively again a very, very high correlation with methane output. So if I talk about it in the context of efficiency, cow live weight, and then obviously that's given us a handle on the whole feed intake part of the efficiency equation. And then the other aspect is obviously the weight of the calf. Okay, so, and we're weighing the calves and the cows now. So obviously then we've got that ratio between cow live weight and wean calf weight. So that's one aspect of efficiency. And then the other traits that you factor into that have to be then the female fertility traits. So they're factored in, that's into that overall replacement index. So the age at first calving, calving interval, cow survival. And that gives you that overall efficiency, cow efficiency, effectively index, or yeah, okay?
So no focus on actual feed efficiency?
So the focus on feed is very much around cow live weight. Now, one of the, and this is, okay, work in progress. We if you come to our performance test station in Kildare, I talked about 500 animals that are going through there. So historically, we would have been putting young bulls and steers. We're starting to put heifers through there as well, so getting direct feed intake information on females. And we plan to develop that up to also bring cows through there as well. So we're currently, our feed intake data is coming from, has been coming from males, but obviously we want to then also start to gather feed intake data directly on females. And that project has just started, so we have started that, okay?
John, one quick question.
Andrew, I'd like you to just give me your views on including international data and what's the best way to do that based on your experiences.
So we currently, John, I actually, in another role, I chair ICAR, Interbeef, International Evaluations. So how we do it at the moment is we directly engage with a number of countries, and we integrate their national EBV as a correlated trait, okay? It works okay, but there's a much better way to do it, which is obviously individual countries, including potentially New Zealand, submitting their data up into an international evaluation. Now, if we can do that, we've already doing that for 3 breeds in 7 or 8 countries in the context of ICAR Interbeef. But if we can get a more engagement with the likes of Agbu and Abri Breed Plan, and potentially in North America, to submit their data into an international evaluation, well, then that allows the individual participants to take the international EBV and, without double counting, integrate it back into your national evaluation. I mean, that's the way I see it has to happen, because in Ireland, we're going to be wanting to run weekly genetic evaluations, whereas at an international level, I mean, they'll be happening 2 or 3 times a year of all of the international data. So that's how I would see it happening in the future, John. But New Zealand obviously has a role in that as well, because you participate in, you know, your gen beef evaluations are obviously done by breed plan at this point in time.